introduction. I feel like I'm sitting next to an expert, not only about media, but about the New York Times. I have to watch what I say when I'm speaking next to him. First of all, I would like to thank you, all of you, for accepting to do this meeting in English. I know that you're doing it for me, so I really appreciate it. Everyone addressed you this morning, early afternoon in English, so I really appreciate this. I love doing these kind of exercises. I do that several times a year, talking to students who are thinking about pursuing careers in journalism, perhaps in communication, in advertising. So hopefully some of you might come for organizations like the New York Times one day, and we really hope that's going to be the case. And it's great as well because if you don't work in this field, hopefully you will become readers of the New York Times. And everything that we do and everything I'm going to talk about today is about this. It's about the journalism, and it is about readers. And we shouldn't forget, what we do. Everything about brand content, about advertising in general is to come in support of what our newsroom is doing, and we feel that they're doing a very important job. Only 13% of the world population has access to free news still today. Only 13% of the world population has access to free news today. And we feel like it is something that is very important to people in countries like Spain, in the US, in Europe, but it's still a rare commodity, and hopefully it will be more and more the case for people around the globe, because we enjoy it every day, but a lot of people don't. So hopefully whatever we do on the business side helps to support that mission. So today I will talk to you about brand content, obviously. And I'm going to start by showing you a small film that sort of presents a number of campaigns that we have done. And then I will tell you a little bit about how we got there, okay?
We are constantly looking for new ideas.
It's time for a change.
I believe I can create consciousness within robots.
What I really love about doing my sculpture is that it feeds my heart and feeds my soul.
Life for beekeepers, farmers, even you and me, is about to change for the better.
We understand the power of innovation and an incredible experience.
Our graduation rates are up, our test scores are up.
We see grandeur, we see elegance, we see excellence.
Maybe cliche, but I do find a lot of pleasure and joy in the work that I do.
Work is to create light. There's a certain amount of magic in that.
But how is the way we see this connected to the way we see this?
My hope is to strive for a purity of expression through this dance medium.
You just kind of have to go for it, right? You don't want to live with regret, wondering, could I have made it?
So, let me try to take you through the journey that has taken us to this point. And I heard a lot of very nice words about the New York Times in the introductions, that we were sort of leading the way in many ways about how perhaps journalism or even advertising is being sort of done today. It puts a lot of pressure on us. We're not trying to lead. We're just trying to do our own thing. And it happens that we're a big company, a big news company, but again, we're not taking that particular position. It just happens that we're unhappy if we're doing things that do stand apart. Branded content, Ishmael gave a definition already about what it is, and it is about a message that is done through content that is paid by a particular organization. And actually, branded content is not so new. We started to talk about brand content in a big way with the rise of digital and all of the techniques that were available to us. But actually, brand content started with radio back in the 1930s.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight you are invited to listen to a new radio program. It's a program conceived by the people who furnish the wires that take this program and every other program to all parts of America and to all of you listeners overseas. We are the people. There are 275,000 of us, of your telephone company and the associated companies covering the rest of the country in the Bell system. It is our job to transmit the human voice.
Get the message. Somebody sort of trying to explain to them about what they do. It's not just straightforward advertising with a simple message, a brand, very short message. It is, and it was the same with television. We can see forms. I'm not going to play it because it can be a little bit long. But then, as the world sort of moved on and the world of advertising moved on, brand content took the form of, when it was mainly in print, of this kind of work. And even we at the New York Times, or one of our sort of sister newspaper, the International Herald Tribune, around the world, we did a lot of brand content, and we created stories for brands. It was interesting to see that even though we were creating stories for Rolex or Credit Suisse or Lexus, that they still tried to put an ad in the page. So they were creating stories, but they're still trying to put an ad in the page. But this is something that we had done for a long time. And this is a program that we had done for the watchmaker Jaeger-LeCoultre, and we also partner with UNESCO. And together we try to tell stories about marine sites preservations. Now, of course, this is a worthy cause to preserve marine sites, like we do preserve great places around the globe that get the UNESCO sort of label and stamp. But very few people actually talk, or even journalists talk about the marine sites, what's on the water, and what needs to be preserved from pollution and from what man can do to influence the ecosystem. So together we created these stories. We started in print, and digital was already available to us. And we did these things. But of course, as the techniques available to us evolved, it got really, really sophisticated. But I just want to say that it's not something new. It's kind of something that sort of came more to the surface in recent times, and there is a reason for this. Now, brand content, as Ishmael sort of showed you, is a big part of what publishers do today. Everyone has gone into the business of creating, for stuff for brands, whether it is text, videos, images, and so on. And a lot of people predict that this is going to continue. That we're going to continue to see an increase in demand for brand content. It's going to continue to grow at a rate of about 10 to 15% every year, all the way up to 2021. We will see if that holds true, but those are the predictions. Now, of course, the world, and I'm going now to talk to you a little bit about the world of the New York Times, where I'm going to stay away a little bit from brand content, but tell you how we got really to this stage. So obviously the world and the explosion of digital has forced us to review everything that we do. And you talked earlier about publishing and how our world has been so impacted by this digital transformation, and how it's changed the financing of our journalism. And really, this is fundamentally the main point here. And technology has taken over the world of, not just the world of journalism, but also the world of advertising. And you have, advertising has become pretty complex and pretty wild, I must say. And here you just have lists and names of companies that we call ad tech companies, who are just sort of ruling the ad world today and making what it is. And it's become, frankly, quite crazy. This is another crazy reality about our industry and about the ad industry, is that it is a world that is dominated by Google and Facebook. We've all heard about this, this story, but the reality is that they're taking over the ad world. And when you think about Facebook in particular, Facebook is no more than just a platform that accepts ads, and we're all targets for as we use Facebook or Instagram. And Facebook has become one of the biggest companies in the world by just doing that, and by just actually getting all of this ad business coming to them. It's pretty interesting. Probably some of you might think it's scary, but it's a reality, and they're bigger than Boeing, they're bigger than Airbus, just by all of the ads that go through them. So it is a reality of our business today. And the reality also of the ad business is that they're taking so much of the business that it leaves everyone else to really, really fight very hard for what is left over. And that's very, very complicated, because as these two are growing very nicely, the rest of the digital ad business is actually sometimes, as it was the case at some point last year, going backwards. So it's tough. We're in a business that is quite tough, and it's changing it's changing everything. The system by which we were living for many years. What's happening out there is that they're taking a lot of ad dollars. So if they're taking a lot of ad dollars, probably because they're doing some good things, and they're providing great services, despite a lot of flaws and a lot of things that probably we would not accept from any other company. But there are some things, from whether it is Facebook or even Google, where they feel like a lot of the content and then selling advertising next to this content may not be so acceptable. They're still doing, these kind of things. Yet the world of marketing is throwing dollars at them. It's kind of a weird thing. They were reading our emails to then target you as for advertising. It's kind of creepy, frankly. It's kind of an odd thing. Or Instagram. We love Instagram. Well, guess what? It's not as safe. It looks safe, but sometimes it's not as safe as we think it is. Now, some of the new darlings in the news business, and we want to make this point about the difference between what a company like the New York Times does versus what companies like BuzzFeed is trying to do. Now, a couple of years ago, BuzzFeed was, again, the new darling in the US. Stock markets love BuzzFeed, and the valuation of that company was actually much, much higher than the New York Times. It was kind of odd. But because the promise of what they could deliver was so great that people believed that they would actually survive. 2 years later, 3 years later, people are starting to rethink that position a little bit. But the problem about companies like that rely strictly on advertising, because of what Google and Facebook are doing and everything that's happening, is making them do things like that and post stories like these in the middle of stories that could be very relevant and very good, actually, about the US administration and so on. Even reputable companies like the Huffington Post have to rely on these techniques to attract people, to make sure that they produce enough pages, that people click on enough articles so that they can, in turn, sell ads to marketers. We don't want any of that. And we think there's a better future for news than this. Now, all of this has had also a very, very big, and the one element which is why we are relying on brand content so much today, it's because of this. It's because the entire ad world, which is taken over by these big social platforms and this incredibly complex world, has had also one there was one consequence of this, is the price of advertising. Now, we're just showing an example here what it took us to reach senior decision makers when we were only in print, and what it's just a value. Don't worry so much about how we calculate these numbers. The reality is that when advertisers were paying $365 for 1,000 people they were reaching, now they're only paying $80. And again, the way that we calculated it is pretty generous. Usually they're paying probably around $20 to $30. So we went from them paying $365 to $30. You can imagine what that does to the financing of a company like the New York Times. Not just us, but the entire media industry. It's pretty drastic. Let me take you back a little bit to see what has happened. This is how American newspapers in print circulation evolved around time. So what you're saying is that actually the decrease in circulation, in print circulation, started in the 1990s. So it's not a new phenomenon. And at that time, television started to become more and more of a reality. More and more channels were coming. We were breaking away from having sort of 2 or 3 national channels, and we started to see a lot of, so the media offering started to explode. But what has happened is that in the meantime, while circulation started to decline, advertising continues to increase. So the media companies didn't worry so much about what was happening. We were just thinking, okay, let's continue doing whatever we're doing. Advertising's coming, revenue is coming, it's fine. And then, of course, 2008, 2009, something very drastic happened, big financial crisis in the world, and everything went down in a big way. And actually, we started to see advertising falling at a higher rate than our circulation, our print circulation. Now, around that time, we saw that digital advertising arrived around, we started, in the early 2000s, we started to see advertising coming on our digital platforms around that. But remember what I told you about the value of advertising. This is what happened between 2003 and 2012 for the publishing business in America. But I'm sure it was the same around the world. That we gained 3 billion as an industry, and we lost 23 billion. Imagine what it does to your company and the way that you've been financing your journalism all along. So it got us to rethink everything at that time, and around that time we rethought everything. And of course today we are reaching 165 million. We've never had so many readers in our entire history, which is wonderful. And we started to charge for our content. We love advertising, we love brand content. I'm going to talk to you some more about brand content, but we have to rely on readers. We have to rely on subscribers to finance our journalism. We believe that those that don't rely on these subscription models are going to have a very, very hard time, or they're going to have to do a lot of weird things on the internet to attract readers, and we don't want to do that. We think there's a better world for us. So we have 3.5 million subscribers today. We're very proud about this, paid subscribers. We've built the largest subscription model in the world. We've never had so many subscribers in our entire history, so it's wonderful. So the digital world has brought us a way to spread our content around the world. Social media kind of banged on their head a little bit, but they have brought us also this new platform and this new way of distributing our content. So on that side, they're doing a very nice job also for us. It's just on the ad side that is a little bit more difficult. And this is also a reality of our business today, is the fact that only Google and Facebook are really, really doing what it takes to monetize their audience through advertising. It's very difficult for us. However, on the subscription side, this is what we want to do. So as a company, we will continue to go after subscribers. That is very, very important. But as we're talking about that, we're also being we're saying we're being helped by some people who talk about the New York Times. You may have heard about how he refers to the current U.S. president refers to us as the failing New York Times, the failing company. Showed you a couple of things that Ishmael wrote at length about this, and it says that no, we're not a failing company, and that we're not the enemy of the American people. And actually, all of this is kind of a game that is being played. It's a game of communication, because when President Trump is coming to our building, he's in our boardroom here, talking to our journalists, he's saying very nice things about the New York Times, and he's very, very complimentary about what we do and what we represent. So it's a bit of a game, and it's very important. And just to remind everyone that also the New York Times we're the ones who broke the story on the emails of Hillary Clinton, which a lot of people believed is the one element and the one story that got her to lose the election. We're the ones that broke that story. So we're not really doing anything against President Trump. But it got us as well to take an ad campaign, and I want to show you this ad campaign. If we can maybe have sound on it, that would be great.
Alternative facts are just plain delusional.
The media needs to be held accountable.
The truth is, locker room talk is harmless.
The truth is, we need to put the safety of the American people.
Investigation of any type of
That's advertising. Very simple. That's not brand content, it's advertising. But it works, and we felt that it was the right moment for us to say this again, that truth matters, and this is our business, is to tell stories and to tell the truth. Now, let's pass that on. Another reality of our business is this one. Again, ads, prices falling, the world's changing, we rely more and more on subscriptions. 10 years ago, 70% of our business was in advertising. Today, it's only 30% of our business that is in advertising. A chunk of that, of course, is coming from brand content, and this is what I'm going to talk to you about today, but this is a big, big, big change in the balance of things. We feel that we're in a better place today, actually, by relying more on our readers than we do on our advertisers. Not that we don't want advertising, we do. It's my job, so we do. But again, it's a strike difference from where we were 10 years ago. Now, Ishmael said that more and more publishers rely on Content Studio. Some publishers, and you showed a graph that I thought was so interesting about that still the majority of publishers rely on their own newsroom to produce content for brands, and actually some very important companies like Forbes still do as well. We don't think this is a model that can be sustained or can work. It works because these people know how to produce content, and this is how T-Brand Studio came into exist. But we feel that it is our journalists shouldn't be asked to write for brands. We think that our journalists should write for our readers, and that we, on the side, can create content, and very good content, by people who are journalists by training and by education, or by work experience, but that they should only do it for brands, and we shouldn't mix the two. One of the reasons why also it's very important that we don't mix the two worlds is because when you're on the advertiser side, when you're the brand, you're in control of the content because you're paying for it. So you have the right to change the content up until the last minute before it is published. But if you ask a journalist, many of you might become journalists tomorrow, if you have a brand that, up until the last minute say, well, no, can you please change that paragraph, or can you please change the, you may not like it so much. So we feel that the brands, we want to protect the brands as well, making sure that whatever, they should be in control of what is being produced for them. So this is why we separate the two worlds. Now, there are a lot of different things. For those of you who watch CNN, it's the world of content, marketing, and the world of news sometimes is, and by the way, I love CNN. It's not a criticism at all of CNN. I think their international news feed is very good. But sometimes you do see brands coming into the programs of CNN, which or they promote certain places, definitely based on investments they're getting. Interesting what they're doing in the Middle East. You watch CNN International on the weekends, and it becomes TV Dubai or TV Abu Dhabi. Kind of a weird things, but as you understand the commercial relationships and the agreements there are with this part of the world, then you understand a little bit more what's happening. Not that CNN is not independent in their reporting, because they are, but sometimes you do see brands arriving in their programs which clearly have come for commercial reasons. We believe in church and state. Very, very important to separate things. We label everything. It was interesting, again, in the graphs that you showed that some companies still don't label, that the content is paid for. The readers, when you're charging for content, you have to be clear to your readers. And you're still, if you're charging for content and you still push advertising to your readers, you better be clear with what you're putting in front of them. Otherwise, they will not subscribe. They will refuse to pay for your content. So you got to be very, very careful. And we do clearly label this. Now, T-Brand Studio. This is what our newsroom thought of brand content, our own newsroom, when we brought to them the idea of doing brand content. They said, what? You guys are going to do what? And they thought that it was not worthy of journalism. They didn't think that it was, only they could produce quality stuff. And then we did this story. Some of you may have seen it. It was a story that we did for Netflix. Many of you, I'm sure, have watched Orange is the New Black. And what T-Brand Studio did at that time, we actually went to interview real women inmates. And it was a way to talk about the show with real stuff, with real journalism. It was paid for by Netflix. It was all labeled as such. It was great. It was really watching a piece of great reporting, journalism. And even one of our star writer was a media columnist, you may have heard of him, David Carr, tweeted this, that said brand-sponsored journalism does not suck. So it's kind of a recognition that even from the man who was probably one of the most visible sort of media commentator in America and around the world, to get his not an endorsement, but a recognition that the content was actually worth looking at, and so it really kind of gave T-Brand Studio the boost that we needed, and what we say is that we combine the disciplines of journalism with the art of marketing, and this is what we do, and we do that to create stories for brands, and of course, was interesting also in the graphs that you showed about what was the right combination for brand content to be efficient. Yes, we do have the audience, we have the right platform, we have a brand that people want to be associated with, but at the same time, it puts a lot of pressure on on what T brand produces, because we're fighting for our readers' time. When a reader comes to the New York Times, or if a reader comes to La Vanguardia or El País or Süddeutsche Zeitung, they don't come to see advertising. They come to read articles, to see photos and videos and so on. So you have to make sure that the content you're pushing is of very good quality. Otherwise, people won't engage with it. And if people don't engage with it, then it's not efficient and you're throwing money away. So that's very important that we, but it does put a lot of pressure on what T brand is. So we have learned a lot, and we've done a lot of things over this past 4 years. We've brought in a lot of expertise. We have done today, actually at the end of 2017, we will be at around 380 campaigns for many of the brands that you saw in the little introductory film. And we have brought in all of this expertise in-house. So yes, it is 150 people. Ismail was right. He got that number right. That's why he's a good journalist himself. He's done his research and his checks. We started with just a handful of people a few years ago. And as brands came to us and we became a little bit more agile in producing content for them, we started to bring in more and more experts. But we have recruited journalists who were journalists for Business Week, for Time, for Monaco, for really a number of people that we recruited a couple of people that used to work for our own newsroom, but who now only write for T Brand Studio, videographers, graphic designers. I mean, a lot of different people that sort of bring their expertise to that, and people that we call producers, who are people who follow projects. Those are very important, because the one thing that brand content does also to your organization is it's very time consuming. You produce content, but it's very time consuming on both sides. Before, advertisers rely on advertising agencies to create an ad, and then the ad was just distributed, but it really, and so they were working on a media plan, but that's all they were doing. Now, of course, when we're creating content, we can't be expert at every company that we work with. So we need to have input from these companies to work with us alongside the project. So it does require a lot of people to manage these projects, and that's what we have. We have people in New York, we have people in Paris, in London, and in Hong Kong, because we do have brands that want to work with us in these different parts of the world. We're winning awards, but that's not perhaps so important. And what we want to show you through this video is that we can be very sophisticated if brands require us to be sophisticated. So yes, these techniques of video production, this one is in Iceland. We went and filmed, just to show you that we can go to extremes to produce stuff. This one was for Cartier.
This helps me recalibrate and refocus on the things that really do matter to me.
But again, you get the sense of the quality of the video. We can all do videos on our phones today. You can do a small video for relatively small amount of money, and then you can go to these kind of extremes. And so we can do the whole thing. We can create content also using technology, and we do a lot of that. This was a chat box that we created for UBS. UBS wanted to tell a story about artificial intelligence and how they are supporting and funding research in artificial intelligence, with the objective ultimately to improve customer relations. The whole idea is to put, in order to get there, is to put emotions into robots. So it's kind of a scary world as well. It's Blade Runner coming to us. Interesting that there is a sequel that just came out. But anyway, so we did this story. We went to we went to Tokyo to actually interview and film a professor who's one of the main experts in this field. And we created this particular story and how actually robots are starting to have emotions. So of course, it's all programmed, but it's quite interesting. And then you can go back to the own sort of UBS website, but there's very little branding. One of the main difference really in brand content, although the word brand is there, is that there is very little branding. The ones that we find the most efficient are the ones where actually a brand is not trying to push its brand or not trying to push its product. It's they're the ones that tell a story. And so sometimes some companies have a hard time finding the difference between that and pure advertising, because that's what they're trained to do. So that's when they want to push their product or their, but a lot of the times you shouldn't. Brands should sort of focus on the story and not necessarily on their product. Of course, we can measure efficiency. This is the beauty of digital, and this is something that we couldn't do when we were only in print or when it was only video. We can measure how many people, of course, read the story, how long they've spent on the story, and what they have read, what they have seen, whether they have completed the videos. We can measure what we call the scroll rate, which is how fast they go up and down the page. I mean, it's pretty crazy what you can measure today. Exactly where you put your mouse. I mean, it's really nuts. But anyway, it is one of the big advantages of digital, is that you can measure what things are happening. And then what's interesting as well is that this story on this artificial intelligence and this Tokyo professor, we saw this piece on the Guardian website about a year later, and I thought that it was the ad department of the Guardian that had sort of, again, created that story for UBS. No, it was the newsroom of the Guardian that did that story. Same story. So we felt very proud about what T-Brand had done there. It was a great a great signal that that things are working. This one was also for Cartier. Just again shows the how we can, of course, use digital. We can use film techniques to go back to. We use images of the 1900s. Was a story about Fifth Avenue and how Cartier has a mention, as they call it, on Fifth Avenue, and how things have how Fifth Avenue has changed over time, but that the Cartier mention is still there. So we have recreated 360 films, also from the early 1900s. So a lot of techniques being used, and you saw some prints as well. You saw a little bit of print. We can still use print. Print is still relevant. Print is by no means dead. This one that we did for Philips. Philips is a company that wants to be known, more and more known, for all of its work in healthcare, as opposed to light bulbs or appliances or TVs. And so we produce this work. When we produce work for a company like Philips, the company owns the content. And they can reuse the content. So this particular content was then reused on the Forbes website. So they wanted also to reach the Forbes audience. We're totally fine with that. So we produce content on the one side. Of course, we're distributing the content, and we want to distribute the content, but we are totally okay if a brand wants to reuse the content, because production is expensive. The brand wants to reuse the content to distribute it on other platforms. This is a piece that we did for Goldman Sachs 2-3 years ago, and using a lot of graphics to explain how capital markets work. And if you go on the Goldman Sachs website, you can still find those graphics on their website. So if they're so when we're producing content, we're also producing content for an advertiser to use as they wish, whether they want to redistribute it on other platforms, they want to use it on their own website. It's totally fine. It's about content production at the end of the day. Now, brand content is great, it's beautiful, you can do a lot of wonderful things, but it's only as good as it is being distributed and seen by people. So you need to lead people to that content. And so we're using a lot of, we're using ads, we're just using ads throughout the site to lead people to this particular content. So the page is there permanently. So this story on UBS, if you go on Google and you type UBS paid post, you will get redirected directly to that page. But you have to know, and you have to know. So during the campaign, obviously, we're using ads throughout the site to lead people when they click to the page. And again, what we're trying to do is to promote these stories alongside our own stories. So we have, I'm sure you go on news websites every day and you see that as you're reading an article, then you're being presented a number of other articles, you're being recommended a number of things. So we do recommend, of course, a number of articles to our readers, and alongside sometimes we'll say, okay, this is a story by UBS, Air France, IBM, or whatever. It's just... And then I'm going to talk to you now about what's coming next. Because as you have seen this morning, everybody now is going into the world of producing content. Every publisher has a studio. We feel that we have to be good, we have to be better than everybody else, just so that people can see the difference. Because production, there's different quality in production. It's like everything else. But we think that everything is evolving, and is evolving pretty fast. So we have started to partner with brands. So whenever we're launching something new at the New York Times, we are trying to do it in conjunction with certain brands. The Daily is a new podcast program. Podcasts are coming back in a big way. It's so interesting. We launched this one, which is called The Daily. It's a big hit in the US, but also around the world. It's what's interesting about The Daily, if you want to listen to it, it's that it's a journalist he's called Michael Barbero, and a lot of the times he invites other journalists to explain how they got stories, how they got to the bottom of certain stories. So he will invite Jodie Cantor and who broke the story on Harvey Weinstein, for example, and how she got there. How it's like and so it's fascinating. It's like so it's sort of a behind the scene kind of, and this is what podcasts do to you. So, but when we launched this, we did it with BMW and we told BMW that we could guarantee perhaps something like 700,000 downloads of The Daily, and in 1 month we got to 36 million downloads. The thing went really sort of crazy because it was so good, and so again, it's just a way to show that we're partnering with a brand. So this is not really brand content, although in the middle of The Daily, then there is sort of an ad, and the advertiser can explain the message, whatever message they want. The Daily 360 is another form also of marketing that we do with Samsung. What's interesting here is that is what we say here is journalism by the New York Times, technology by Samsung. So what we have done is that we have equipped many of our journalists and reporters with Samsung 360 cameras, and every day there is a 360 film that is being produced and shown on all of our platforms, and so every day Samsung gets some promotion of that. And then more and more we are moving into services, marketing services. So this is sort of the ecosystem of the ad, the ad business, and you've got some publishers, and then you've got some ad agencies in the mix. And more what we want is for T-Brand to be here. We want to become an ad agency because we feel that we know our advertisers, we know our readers, and we're moving into this world where, of course, we want to come up with ideas, with a story, but we think that we have the right audience and we have the right rigor to do this kind of work. We're also going into the world of consulting. So this is work that we did for HP, where a company as big as HP, they're producing a lot of content themselves. And we feel that sometimes they don't really know what to do with this content, or sometimes the quality is very unequal and inconsistent. So we can look at companies, what they do, what they produce, and we can help them in organizing their content. We can create content, but we can also help them in organizing that content. And more we're going to be doing things that are more and more sophisticated, like this particular film we did for, for GE. Play. I wasn't playing. So anyway, I'll lead you to this with 360 virtual reality film that we created. It was pretty good. We also bought some agencies. We bought an influencer network, a marketing agency called Hello Society. They specialize in social influencers. So those people, sometimes when you're on Instagram, you receive sort of requests from people who have tens of thousands of followers, and these people specialize in reselling their network to brands, and we feel this is also a way of distributing content, and we work more and more with this. So social influencers is also something that we've taken a step into this business, and experiential marketing. What experiential marketing is how to use technology and for marketing purposes. We've done things with, for example, IBM, where we created an app through augmented reality for IBM. I don't know if some of you saw the movie Hidden Figures. It was very, very interesting movie about these three women that Americans would call coming from minority groups, and who were back in the 60s working on NASA programs, space programs, didn't get the recognition, the attention. So IBM, they were working on IBM computers at the time, so IBM was also a big sponsor of the movie, and they asked us for something unique. And so what we did through Fake Love was to create an augmented reality experience where at certain touch points across America, you would have, when you were getting close to a touch point, you would get an alert on your phone, and you would see, as you see here on the left, little statues, virtual statues of a particular engineer that didn't get quite the recognition that he or she should have had at that time, at their time. So we did that. It was pretty cool. It was really, really interesting, very, very cool, and IBM really loved it, and it was really a fun project. And this is what Fake Love does.
Hey, myself, call me on myself, call me on myself, call me on myself. Yeah, beat me 911, see what you gon' tell. Beat me 911, see what you gon' tell. Beat me 911, beat me 911, beat me 911, beat me 911. Yeah, beat me 911, beat me 911, beat me 911, see what you gon' tell.
So as you see, we're moving. I mean, it was at the beginning. It was really about stories like the ones that we would produce, and we're moving more and more towards marketing services, global marketing services for brands. So thank you very much for listening.